But I think the film does a fantastic job of showing us what it was like in the prison itself. So we're going to walk through afterwards. We're going to go to some specific rooms. We're not going to go to all of the rooms today. I do recommend, again, if you have more time and you'd like to stay and read every single sign. I have people in my family who are like that, right? Like some people come in, they look around, they're like, okay, I've seen it. And some people are like, hold on, there's fine print with a footnote that references a sign over there. And they're like, right? So to each their own. But what we are going to do is we're going to walk through, tell some of the stories of individuals that were here, and some of the stories, for example, like I said, there is a tunnel here. We will talk about it. And so the reason that we're watching the film is I just want to give us kind of that sense of what it was like. There are a couple of rooms where I will give us a warning if people don't want to come in. And those rooms include the solitary confinement rooms, where you can actually go in and close the door and be in that room. And if you choose not to enter that because that's too overwhelming, I'll give you that warning. And the other room is the gallows. Well, the gallows were never used for Jews here in Yerushalayim. It is the very famous story of Moshe Barazani and Meir Feinstein, which we will tell. And so for some people, seeing the gallows is a little bit overwhelming, and so I'll give you a warning before we go into that room as well. Otherwise, the rooms have been staged. They are actually staged with mostly materials that were used in the time of the British Mandate from 1917. Really, we're talking about post-1930s. And so if anybody at any point feels like the stories are overwhelming or whatever that is, so you can feel free to wait for us at the front, because that's where we're going to do our summation. Do you want me?
Yeah, guys, if everyone just quickly raise your hands. If you have a senior card, just raise your hands so we can count. What you ask?
If you have.
Dear Mum, Dad, and Vorla, today ended my first year in prison. Time goes by so slowly. Outside, the struggle goes on.
4 Jews killed, 10 wounded.
And we're here doing nothing. It's awful. The years still ahead of me. Agonizing. I couldn't hear you at the end of the visit.
Orders to arrest escapees.
Because of the yelling in the face. I heard you say somebody arrived from Europe.
700 more clandestine immigrants land.
Was it on Shifra? I read in the paper another clandestine immigrant ship got through. Maybe she was on it. I wish I could be there, helping bring refugees in, building settlements, doing my share. Instead, I'm here in this place, and I can hear only the echoes.
In 1917, the British conquered the country from the Turks. The Jewish people, these who had high hopes that new authorities would aid them in establishing the Jewish homeland promised by the British in the Balfour Declaration.
3 Jews killed en route to Gaza. 7 killed by Arab gunfire. Shooting at Jews in the town of Saka.
Their hopes turned to bitter disappointment.
Jewish bus fired upon in Galilee. 2 Jews wounded in Jerusalem.
The conflict with the Arabs over land and the failure of the British authorities to protect the Jewish population from Arab terrorists resulted in the founding of the Haganah organization in 1920 to defend the Jewish communities and take action against Arab terrorism. Some members of the Haganah who demanded more aggressive action against the Arabs after the riots in 1929 and the massacre in Hebron founded the Etzel National Military Organization. When World War II broke out, the Jewish underground organizations decided on a ceasefire with the British and joined the British Army to fight the Nazis. A small group within the Etzel, however, determined to continue the struggle even then to force the British out of the country.
Nefi Underground blows up Arab houses in Lifta.
The group did not lay down its arms and it founded the Lehi FFI, Freedom Fighters of Israel.
Danny, who sleeps near me, cursed a guard, and they threw him in solitary for 2 days. He was lucky they didn't whip him. He's usually a quiet guy. He blew up when he heard that the British beat up his father and broke the furniture when they were searching his house. We're lucky Rabbi Aryeh Levin was here on Shabbat. He always knows the right thing to say to us. He was here 2 days ago, and already I'm looking forward to his next visit. He's like both a mother and a father to us in here.
The British White Paper Declaration in 1939 dealt another blow to Jewish immigration to Palestine. The country's gates were closed to Jewish refugees from the hell of Nazi-occupied Europe, and the Jewish community's activities here were even more strictly limited. The new edicts provoked further struggle against the British, but they would not repeal them. They arrested members of the Jewish underground organizations and sentenced them to long prison terms.
The British go on the offensive against the Jewish people.
The charges were many and varied, including assault on British troops and military installations, bearing arms, aiding clandestine immigration, taking part in demonstrations, putting up signs, and more. Many people were sent to serve their sentences in the central prison in Jerusalem. Built in the 19th century by the Russians as a women's hostel, it was later converted into a jail by the British. Besides Jewish underground members, Arab inmates and Jewish criminals were also incarcerated here.
Shmulik, our upstairs neighbor. I saw him today, here in jail. Turns out he's been a long-time member of the underground. The British caught him trying to smuggle weapons into Jerusalem. The British are very nervous lately because of the actions against them. Here, we're the first to know how many British have been killed. In the last few weeks, we've been making a lot of coffins for them in the carpentry workshop. When will they realize they have no business to be here in our country?
12 Jews escaped from Jerusalem prison. 12 Jews escaped.
The daily routine is strict and always the same. 5:30 revel, and then line up for a head count of the inmates. At 7:30 the cells and corridors are cleaned up. You should see them. You'd be proud. didn't feel well yesterday, but I decided not to go to the infirmary. That terrible British doctor who was on duty, the one that prescribes cod liver oil for every illness. They say he sells all the medicine on the black market. Today another doctor was there, and he was all right. He told me I probably had the flu, that I should try to rest. They let me stay in the yard for a while. It's the place I like best in jail. At least you have some sunshine, breathe a little fresh air, and relax, and you can weep. In cells, you can't even cry to yourself, and there's that small window in the corner. Even though I try not to, I keep thinking about what happened.
Trial and sentence by the British Criminal Court.
If only they had asked for a pardon.
The gallows in Jerusalem prison had never before been used to hang Jews. Underground members sentenced to death were sent to the prison in Akko for execution. The first Jews scheduled to be hung in Jerusalem were Mayor Feinstein, arrested after the bombing of the Jerusalem railway station, and Moshe Barazani, who attempted to attack the British commander of Jerusalem. Feinstein and Barazani were sentenced to death. The British scheduled the executions for April 21st, 1947. But Feinstein and Barazani had other plans.
Feinstein and Barazani blow themselves up in Jerusalem cell.
We are all tensely awaiting the UN vote next week. We talk about it all the time. We have almost forgotten our differences. You should see members of the Haganah, the Etzel, and the Lehi sit together and dream of an independent Jewish state, and what we will do when it becomes a reality. Even the Jewish criminals here try to join us. On the other hand, there's more tension between us and the Arab prisoners.
UN proposes partition plan for Jewish and Arab state.
I think the British finally understand it's over. They have started packing. I hope our new Jewish state will be established soon, and we will be set free. I know I need to be patient, but I can't wait. I wish there was a sure way to escape. In the last few years, there were several attempts. Some of them were successful. Next week, I'm entitled to a visit, since it's been 2 months since the last one. Please bring Dvorah with you. I miss her very much. It's late now. Everyone is sleeping, and I have to stop. Take care, and give my love to everyone.
The Jewish state is proclaimed.
On May 14, 1948, the last British forces left Palestine. David Ben-Gurion declaring the establishment of the State of Israel. Most of the freed prisoners went directly to the front lines to fight in the battles that were raging all over the country in the War of Independence.
That they have to the War of Independence, whether it be parents or cousins or people that they know. So if anybody wants to share one of those stories, I'm happy to have you do that. I think that that's part of the craziness of what is the state of Israel, is how all interconnected we are. And here we have Olim coming from all over the world, and yet in terms of the founding of the state of Israel, people are so integrally connected. We're going to be a little flexible in the way that we tour the museum today, because the school groups are running not on time. One of them, the boys group, is running early, and the girls group is running late. So she's going to be done in a couple minutes, and we're going to go into the shul, but so we're going to start out here. One of the things as we were walking through, I hoped you noticed, was the rooms on the side, which we're going to walk back through that way, so we'll stop by those rooms. But this is really the prison, and when you saw the film and they were walking around in the courtyard, this is the actual space. Has anybody been to the prison in Akko?
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll notice some similarities, but you'll also notice a lot of differences. One of the things that is interesting, or that people find interesting about British prison, when we think about Jewish prisons, at least my association is like all the stories of like the Gulag and Russia, and in the British prison there was a Mitzvah Yehudi that was kosher. There was a shul. Rav Aryeh Levine came and ran services. So it's interesting in terms of, on the one hand, what is seemingly a very unfair policy, and yet at the same time making sure to stand by prisoners' rights. So it's an interesting mix, if you will. I want to tell two stories out here in the courtyard. And the first story I want to tell is about a gentleman whose name was Gidon, but everybody called him Johnny Pelly. Now Johnny Pelly was a member of the Palmach, and he worked here inside, well, not the laundry, but the kitchen. And his girlfriend, whose name was Bracha Fold, used to come every week and visit him. And one week she doesn't show up. And he's like a little bit nervous. Okay, maybe she had to switch to the next day. And the next day she doesn't show up either. And at this point he says he's really nervous that something's happened to her. And as he was going through the boxes that they would bring into the kitchen for him to prepare food, he found a piece of yesterday's newspaper, and he discovers that she was killed and that she herself was a member of the Palmach. And that she was a member of the Palmach that was killed during an operation of the Aliyah Bet, which was the illegal immigration of Jews to Israel during British Mandate Palestine. When he's released, he goes out to fight, and he's killed himself in battle in the War of Independence in 1948. And so you think of this beautiful couple that has all of this potential and thinking about starting their lives, and yes, he's imprisoned here, but they're able to make it work, and how that wasn't able to be fulfilled. And the truth is that the story of the founding of Israel is, I think, very similar to the story of many tkufot, of many periods of Jewish history, where on the one hand, every single time I see Ben Gurion standing up, Zezu Medinat Yisrael, right here, Medinat Yisrael, and then you hear Rav Fichman making Shechianu, like, it's emotional, it's overwhelmingly emotional, and I'm like, I wanted to have been there and like heard everything, and going to Heichal Atzmaut in Tel Aviv, and all of those different things, and the beauty and the inspiration of that, but at what cost? And I think that especially as Olim, we recognize that the idea of Moser Nefesh for the state, the hope of the Jewish people is that the Moser Nefesh is that I can't have Tropicana. Right? We hope that the Moser Nefesh is that I have a 17-year-old brother, he's 16-year-old brother who everybody who has teenage children, grandsons know, how you doing? Fine. How's life? Good. Bye. Right? Like, that's the relationship that I have with him right now. He'll grow out of it maybe. My father's not one for many words either, so I'm not so sure. But right, those are the challenges that we have to be Moser Nefesh, and that's what the Jewish people want. We don't want to tell the stories of Johnny and Bracha. Right? We don't want to tell the stories of the sadness, and yet part of the recognition of where we stand and what we can do, and the fact that we can just gallivant around Yerushalayim, we need to recognize and have a karta tov for those stories. The other story that I think is significant here, just to kind of give us a sense of how much political pressure meant to the British and how scared they were of the Jewish underground movements. There was a young man whose name was Binyamin, and he was sentenced to 18 years in prison. And in addition to 18 years, he was going to be given 18 lashes. Now, part of being given lashes meant that they would come out to this courtyard and everybody would watch. And it was a deterrent of sorts, also a power play. And the message came through from the Etzel that said that if you give 18 lashes to Binyamin, who at the time was 16, if you give him 18 lashes, we will kidnap a British soldier and give him 18 lashes. And the British were so nervous about that they didn't give him the lashes in the courtyard. They gave it to him in the commander's office, which we'll pass us right at the entrance. You might have noticed it when we came in. So there's a tension that exists here. On the one hand, the British are in charge. On the other hand, they have no idea how to deal with the local population. There are even sympathizers within the British Army for the story of the Jewish people. And a lot of the soldiers are caught in between this rock and this hard place. And then yet a lot of them are cruel. And so we come up across all of those different types of people that you might meet here in the British prison, right? You don't know which kind of person you're getting. Is it the kind one? Is it the not kind one? Is it the one who's under that pressure? We're not sure. And so I don't want to walk away, especially for our Brits in the group, saying that all of the British soldiers were horrible to the Jewish people. It's not true. It was a complicated situation that a lot of people found themselves in that they had to figure out how to navigate. There were some pretty bad people here, but there was also some menches, to borrow the word.
But I do want to say that a lot of Jews don't recognize the crime of the British, that because of them, Jews could not escape from Hitler. And they are really responsible, in addition to, I mean, together with the Nazis, for the murder.
So in the United States, so are many other countries.
But
So I think what you will say the difference is that the British
were
stopped
worse.
people coming into Israel when they had already agreed
One
to that.
second.
British let Jews come in the Kindertransport and so on. It's not
But so what? No, one second.
I just wanna
I
say
know
the
that this is
British
important
had
to you,
a
but I also
mandate.
want to make sure
Yeah.
that, again, great to have conversation when we walk. I appreciate the point of which to say that when you look at how the British acted in World War II, there is huge culpability. The point that I want to make sure that we take away also, though, is that when we're looking at the individual soldiers here, as opposed to a policy, I don't want to walk away having said that all of the soldiers here were bad. And I'll give you an example of why not. I was here with a girl from a seminary, not the seminary that I work at. I was doing a different tour, and her grandfather, her mother is Jewish, her father was not. Her grandfather's brother was one of the soldiers here, right? Really good guy. She had a relationship with his family, all of that kind of stuff. Now, again, we can take this in any different direction. Go to Germany, there were people that saved Jews, every single thing. But my point is just that when we're telling these stories, I want to make sure that when highlighting the challenges and some of the horrible things that happened and the horrible policy that existed, that I make sure that I'm not including and lumping together every single individual, and that's all. And again, I'm going to bring up a point of contention at some point that I think is going to get very heated. I love when people have discussions, and I don't want to shut down opinions, and I don't want to shut down dialogue, but I do want to make sure that as a tour, we continue to tell the stories like that, and then as we walk, we can continue to have discussions that I think make us better thinkers, better Jews, better people, for listening to different vantage points, and that's how we learn. So in terms of that, I continue, please. I like when things get a little heated, but also want to make sure that in terms of the stories that we're telling, the tours that we're doing, that we stay on target. Questions? Okay, let's keep going. a little lip here. A couple of people have not noticed it, so just please be careful as you make your way down. It is hard stone.
Couple of seats over there.
Yep. Come over here. Okay. So this is the shul of the British prison. And like we said, so it's an interesting mix of, again, that kind of association of when Jews are in prison, it's because they're being stripped of their religious rights. And here, it was really a political movement and a Zionist movement, and also, again, not divorcing the idea that Zionism can be a religious movement as well, but the problem that the British had with the Jews was nothing to do with their Judaism. And so they have shul here. And Rav Aryeh Levine, whose picture is over here on the wall, also known sometimes as Tzaddik of Yerushalayim, was the rabbi who really came to minister to the people, the Jewish prisoners that were here. And whether or not they were religious, they found themselves drawn to him. And I'd like to share a few stories about Rav Aryeh Levine. I will tell you, when I first came to Israel, and I was spending a lot of Shabbatot in different families, one Shabbos I picked up the biography written by Rav Ras on Aryeh Levine. Is about this thick, right? So I don't want to buy it because when do I do my reading on Shabbos, and who's going to shut that from place to place? But it happened that for 6 weeks in a row, pretty much every house I went to had this book on the shelf because it was just one of those books that everybody had. So I got to keep going from the same place. Except like in the middle, someone had a different edition of it, and I was like, no, what page am I on? But I was able to finish this book, and I really, if I had to pick the top 10 people in history that inspire me, Rav Aryeh Levine is definitely on that list. Now, does the list actually have 10? I've said this before, and people are like, oh, what are your top 10? So I've never counted exactly, but he's on my top 10, okay? Rav Aryeh Levine lived in Yerushalayim. And if you're in Nachlaot, you can actually walk past his house. His granddaughter lives there today. And I will tell you one story that I told.
Grandson.
Pardon?
Not grandfather, grandson.
I met a granddaughter. I thought she lived there.
He's a grandfather. I'm sorry.
No. So I was taking you around and I'm telling you this story, which is one of my favorite stories of Aryeh Levine. It's very well known. You might have heard it before. If you've ever been in Nachlaot or in the Shuk area, you know that the alleyways are very narrow. And once you're in the alleyway, there's no way to get out. Like thinking back to what we were talking about with the two camels, you can understand in Nachlaot, right? You can't fit one camel, you can't fit a donkey, that's it. There's nothing, it's a person. And Rav Aryeh Levine is walking down one of these alleyways by his home, and a boy of about 15 years old sees him and tries to dodge out of the way, but there's nowhere to go. And he kind of has to sheepishly approach and pass to Rav Aryeh Levine, and Rav Aryeh stops him and says, "No, Yeled, what did I do? Tell me so I can apologize." That was his first, I don't want to have hurt your feelings, why are you avoiding me? And after some hemming and hawing, again going back to those of you who are familiar with teenage boys, so Rav Aryeh Levine was able to pull out from this kid that he wasn't wearing a kippah. And he was embarrassed to be seen by Rav Aryeh without his kippah on. And Rav Aryeh looked at this boy and says, "Listen, I'm a really short man. My eyes, they can't see your head. All they can see is your heart." Now, I love this story. When I told this story outside of Rav Aryeh Levine's home, his granddaughter, who heard the story, said to me, "I need to tell you something." Okay, uh-oh, right? Talk about pressure. She said, "You need to make it known to everybody that it's not that my grandfather didn't care that this kid wasn't wearing a kippah," right? It wasn't that halacha wasn't important to him, but seeing a human being, a fellow Jew, as a person, as a heart, as a neshama, and not just as his kippah, was what that message was. And I said, of course, no problem. Phew, right? What could it be that I told wrong in the story? But that was exactly it. Aryeh Levine stood up for his principles. He stood up for the Torah that he believed in. But at the same time, that never stopped him from connecting to a fellow Jew. He was also not just known as the rabbi of the underground prison, but he was also known as the rabbi of the lepers colony. If you ever by the Jerusalem Theater, there's a building there that used to be a hospital for people with leprosy. And no one would go visit them, except Rav Aryeh. And Rav Aryeh would walk around Yerushalayim going to visit the people that no one else wanted anything to do with. I I will tell you that his grandson, or Benji, who lives in Harnof, took over the shul that Ari was the rabbi of, which is the ghetto fighter shul, the underground prisoner shul, which is also like right behind the Maccabi building area, like in that area on near the shul. So his grandson took over, and he lives in Harnof, but he's still the rabbi of that shul. Every once in a while, he will do a walking tour of what it was like to come from America. He grew up in America. One of Ari's sons had gone to America and got stuck there during the war and wasn't able to come back to Israel. So where Benji grew up speaking English, when you call his phone, the voicemail is in Hebrew, Yiddish, and English for whatever language it is that you need. But every once in a while, he offers walking tours through Naflaot of what his childhood was like growing up in Naflaot with his grandfather. Highly recommend. I've done it myself a number of times. I really very much enjoy it. Pardon?
Don't miss that tour.
It's great. Have you done it? Fantastic. Oh, he's going next week. Here you go. Pardon? Oh, it's already full. Oh, okay. But hopefully they'll do it again because it's fantastic. So now that I'm making you feel bad that you didn't register, or really excited that you did register, let's move on. So Ari Levine's wife actually sewed deeper pockets into his clothing, and the prisoners here would give him notes. And he couldn't write on the notes while he was here because that wasn't allowed, right? He wasn't really allowed to be taking these notes in different places. So he would remember who the note was from and where it was going to, and he would walk around Yerushalayim delivering these notes to different people so that the prisoners could have contact with their families. And he would come here and he would sit and he would talk to them, he would counsel them, and they looked forward, we saw in the film, right? Like, they looked forward to his visits. I'm going to skip forward to one of the last rooms that we're going to visit, which is the gallows, and the story of Moshe Barzani and Meir Feinstein. One from the Essa, one from the Lehi, two boys who were the first to be scheduled to be hanged by the British here in Yerushalayim. Because talking about that pressure that the British felt, until that point, all of the Jews who were sentenced to death were sentenced to be hanged in Akko. Not here in Yerushalayim, because they were worried about the uproar of the Jewish community of the idea of killing Jews in Jerusalem, right? They didn't have an idea of like killing Jews in general, it was just killing Jews in Jerusalem. And so these two boys are the ones who are the firsts. And they decide that they are going to commit suicide and take as many British soldiers that they can as possible when they go. And Rav Ari Levine finds out about this. Why? Because they asked him to smuggle in the orange that had the grenade inside of it. That's how much they trusted him. He said, listen, I can't be a part of this, I can't support this, but of course I won't tell anybody. Eventually, another rabbi, Yaakov Goldman, hears that Rav Ari is not going to be at the execution of these two boys, and how could it be that there's not going to be anybody there? They need a rabbi, something to support. So he comes to visit them the night before, and he says, I'm going to be there. Now, they don't trust him the same way that they trust Rav Ari, so they're like, no, don't come, it's fine, we don't need you. He says, no, the last face that you should see should be that of a fellow Jew and not of a British soldier. I'm going to be here. And that's when they recognize that there's no way to convince him not to come, and they couldn't tell him what the plan was, and so that's when they kill themselves in their cell, which again, we'll tell the rest of that story when we get there. But that's how much they trusted Rav Aryeh. When Rav Aryeh Levine found out that they had died, and that they were going to be buried on Har Zeitim, he walked the entire way home. The man was old, the man was frail, he did not have a lot of money. And people kept offering him, Mechubad Rav, get in, like, we'll give you a ride, we'll get you. He needed to process physically his emotions, and he cried the entire way from Har Zeitim back to his house in Naflaot. Because that's how deeply he felt the loss of these boys. He saw them as extensions of his own family, the same way that he saw all Jews as the extension of his own family. And it's because of Rav Aryeh Levine and the energy that he brought that there are actually testimonies of people from who spent time in prison here, that they were able to make it through, that they were able to see hope on the other side. And going back to that story that his granddaughter so vehemently wanted to make sure that I understood, I think that's the message of Torah, right? That's the idea, is that if Torah doesn't make you the kind of person who can do good like Rav Aryeh, then we're missing something, right? If Torah doesn't make you the kind of person who can be a paradigm like Rav Aryeh, then we're missing a piece of what it is. And the prisoners here, secular or religious, understood that from his living example. What we're going to do now is we're going to cross the hall. Oh, is there a video? Yes.
Menachem Begin is buried next to.
Yes, Menachem Begin is buried next to him. We will talk about that. He chose specifically not to be buried on Har Herzl as the head of the Etzel. He also was very instrumental in them being recognized as soldiers. We will talk about Menachem Begin. But yes, you are correct. There is a group in there, so I'm going to see how long they're going to be. It could be they're waiting for us and we're waiting for them, kind of thing. But this next room is an important room. So.
Oh, you're going to have one of those tours with like this.
Not that I am familiar with.
It's a good place to sit.
There's one on Sunday, but they're
משרות הצורות ומהירות מארגוני המחתרת ההגנה, האצ"ל ולח"י מועלות למסעות חתומות העומדות כאן מול כניסת בית הכלא לנשים של בית לחם. הן נשלחות אל מחנה המעצר בעתלית. זהו רגע הסיום של תקופה שהחלה במעצרה של אחים חדשים של לוחמת האצ"ל בקיץ 1939. זו הייתה האסירה הנמסרת היהודייה הראשונה בחיל האוויר. היא הייתה גם במשך 5 שנים היהודייה היחידה בנסיבות אסירות ערביות בסיום. היא נעצרה במגרש הרוסים ליד בית הסוהר, כאשר היא ראויה פנים ודסה עם ירדות ופלורות. הייתה מסיבות שונות ומגוונות, אבל היה בסיס אידיאולוגי שאיחד את כולן, ההתנגדות למדיניות חסימת הגבולות של ארץ ישראל לעליית יהודים. אביב 1944, חיסיה שפירא חברת לח"י נעצרת בתל אביב בעקבות השנה, ואיתה נמצאים כלי נשק וחומרי תעמולה. מואשמת בהחזקת נשק ובהשתייכות לארגון טרור. כאן, בית הדין הצבאי הבריטי אומרת לשופט מעל דוכן הנאשם: אני כופרת בסמכותו של בית הדין הזה. אינני מכירה בשלטון הסוגר את שערי המולדת למיליונים של אחים הנטבחים בעולם. חיסיה נידונה ל4 שנות מאסר. אביב 1946, דבורה קלפוס, חברת האצ"ל, נתפסת בחולות בת ים. היא הגיעה למקום על מנת לאסוף כלי נשק של לוחמים ששבו מפעולת חבלה במסילת הברזל ליד אשדוד. לשופט היא אומרת: במלחמת שחרור זו נוצרה אומתנו מחדש, והיא תכריח אתכם כי תכירו בה ובזכותה למולדת. ואתם תכירו באומה העברית ברצונכם או נגד רצונכם, אך תכירו בה. יום זה יבוא, למענו, נפשנו. דבורה נידונה ל15 שנות מאסר. בסתיו 1934 החרימו הבריטים את בית הקיץ של משפחת חנדל שבשכונת ג'בל דרום שבבית לחם. הם הפכו את הבית הזה לבית סוהר. חדרי השינה הוספו לתאי מאסר, נבנו גם כמה תאי צינוק ומרפאה אחת. כך מתארות אותו האסירות. בקומת הכניסה נמצא משרד ונערך הרישום של האסירות. בסמוך נמצא מחסן, אחריו מטבח ומטבחון, לידם המדרגות שמובילות לקומה השנייה. לאורך המסדרון החדרים של חולות הרוח, מדרגות נוספות הובילו לקומה העליונה, שם נמצאו החדרים של האסירות היהודיות והערביות. בקצה המסדרון היה הגג ששימש אותנו לטיול היומי. בבית הסוהר נמצאו בין 60 ל-90 אסירים. כך מתארת יהודית יחזקאל, חברת לח"י, את הגעתה לכלא כשהיא מוטלת בצורה בתוך משוריין בריטי. הורדנו מהטנק מצעקות, מובלות מול השער, כאשר עשרות שוטרים מקיפים אותנו. ליד השולחן ישב בריטי אחד וצבח עלינו. לא הבנתי כלום. לא ידעתי היכן אנחנו, מה רוצים מאיתנו. המון דלתות, כולן נעולות בשרשראות ברזל ומנעולים ענקיים. קיץ 1943, ישראל המלמד בת 18 יוצאת למשימה ליד טול כרם כחלק מכיתת הסיור של ההגנה. 4 הגברים ו3 אנשים נראים חשודים לכוח הצבאי הבריטי שעבר במקום והם נעצרים מיד. על כך מספרת ישראל. אצלי מצאו מחסנית של אקדח, אז נשפטתי רק לשנתיים. חסיה שאצלה מצאו אקדח נדונה ל5 שנות מאסר. הדבר הראשון שהדהים אותי בכלא היה המפגש עם בנות האצ"ל והלח"י. עד אז חשבתי שיש להם קרניים. הייתה אז אווירה של שנאה למי שקראנו הפורשים. מי שאני מצאתי שם היו נשים בעלות שיעור קומה, כמו טובה סבוראי ונלי פישר. לבנות ההגנה באותו הזמן היו יותר אוכל ובגדים, אז עשינו קומונה וחילקנו הכל בין כולם. נדונה למאסר עולם על חלקה בפיצוץ בתי המלאכה של הרכבת בחיפה. כך היא מספרת. לא הבנתי שהם מתכוונים להשאיר אותנו בחיים ולהושיב אותנו בבית הסוהר. הייתי בטוחה שאותי ואת חבריי יהרגו. לזה הייתי מוכנה. התחלתי לפגוש שם בנות שיושבות כבר שנים ויש להן גורל גבוה. הם קיבלו אותנו בחום ושרו לכבודנו. בחורף 1944 הועברו עצירות המחתרת ופרדו משאר האסירות ובחולות הרוח בבית הכלא. הם הועברו לכאן, וילה סלם, שאף היא הוחרמה והוסבה לבית כלא.
Okay,
Okay, I'm going to stop you here. If everybody can follow me. Okay. So first of all, I apologize about the lack of space in the women's room. I felt it was still worth it. It's one of my big complaints in terms of all these other rooms are big enough to be able to hold groups, and yet when we get to the women's story, it's a little bit harder. But the fact of the matter is, it is the space that they have, right? Like, it's not like they built the building like that. Just to address a couple questions before I talk about the room that we were in. What was the capacity of the prison? So when the prison was first started in use, it was about 200 prisoners. By the end of the British Mandate, they were holding 500 prisoners here. And so you can see as we walk through, what I am going to do is at the end of this room, I'm going to give you a few minutes to kind of take a peek at the different rooms on your own and read whatever signs you'd like. You can take a look at some of the artifacts that they have from the people that lived here, and I'll tell you when and where to meet. But you'll notice as you're looking at these rooms that there's very obviously difference in conditions, right? Here we're in a room that has bunk beds. Some of the rooms have mats on the floor that had a single bed until that violence that we were talking about in between the Arabs and the Jewish prisoners that were here. They were mixed in the rooms, and there was one person who was given kind of extra privileges. Usually they earned them, although sometimes they bought them. And they were given a bed, and they were in charge of that room. And that could be an Arab prisoner, that could be a Jewish prisoner, and then eventually, but they were split so that it was specific to whoever was in the room. The other thing is, in beds like this, for example, they had different categories of prisoners who had committed different kinds of crimes, and so you will see that variation in terms of the types of accommodations, if you will. The other thing that I want to address just before we keep going is that while we were watching the first movie, I did a little bit of Googling. Beit Sergei was given back to the Russians by the Israeli government as a form of gift. Let's have good communications between our countries, and so that happened actually officially in 2012 is when the SPNI took their offices out of there, and so the hotel is not exclusive to Russians, but it was built with the Russian community in mind as a place where Russian pilgrims could come. The Russian government still wants more of the Russian compound, even though that orange transfer and the rest of the money did take place. And there is still a building, while it's not the Beit Sergei building, that is under dispute between these three different parties of the church, the two churches and Prince Philip. So just to give you an update about that, thank you for pointing it out. I learned something new today, so I appreciate that. Let's talk about this room for a second. I said underground prisoners museum. There is no underground, and yet there is one underground, and it's in that corner, and I'll let you go take a look at it in a second. You can't really see it from here, but what's the story? So there were 12 prisoners that actually escaped from this prison. Now, unlike the Akko prison, where it was just we're breaking you out, and I actually wrote an article about it in the Mizrahi about a year ago, around Purim time. If anybody's interested in more details about the Akko prison, you can look that up online or just read about it on Google also. But that was like, we're just gonna go and break them out, and it was kind of no finesse, if you will. This was a much more, there was a lot of Jewish cup in this initiative here. What was the deal? They discovered there was somebody who dressed up as a municipal worker, was able to steal the plans of the prison and the surrounding areas. And they found out that there's a sewer that connects very close to this room. And so they decided they were going to dig a tunnel from this room into the sewer to help the prisoners escape. What's the problem? How are they going to explain all of the different dirt and mud and stuff that they've dug out? Where are they going to put that? Aha, so take a look behind us. They go to the British and they say, listen, this room is very big. And so when we do spongia, we have nowhere to put the water because you need a step to get up. So we can't sweep it out like a lot of the other rooms can. It doesn't evaporate because of the room. So we need a place to be able to put the water. Can we please dig a hole here? Not only does the British officer in charge say yes, he says, let me give you some tools. So they get the tools and they have the cover of digging this other tunnel, and they dig, well, this other trough, if you will, and they dig this tunnel, and 12 people are able to escape before they're found out. And so this is called the escape room. Now, we don't go into the tunnel, so like I said, the answer is really no. This is not an underground museum, and yet there is a story of a tunnel, and so it does live up to that mystique of the name of the Underground Prisoners Museum. The other thing that's very important, and I'll let you all take a look over here, the other thing that I want to point out is you can see that there are these glass protective cases here. This is graffiti that was done by the prisoners. Okay, so you can see all sorts of different things, whether it's names, whether it's pictures, and we have this really all over the prison, but they were able to, specifically they wanted to highlight the ones here that they were able to preserve. So what we're going to do now is as follows. It's 1 o'clock. I want to give you 10 minutes to kind of just walk around a little bit. I know it's not a lot of time. I know you could spend a lot more time here, but there's still a couple of rooms I want to do together as a group. In 10 minutes, if we can meet back by that split where the bathroom is, and that way if anybody needs to use the restrooms again, you can. At 1:10, I'll leave from there to the second part of the museum, and we'll look at the solitary confinement and the memorials and the gallows to end our tour. Okay? Great.
The same floor they had the entrance.
Squeeze through and then out to the sewers.
How, like, Is there anyone that just wait here for a minute?
Go quickly.
Yeah, well, I figured. I know where it's staying. slide area. They built them out, make it as different.
That's amazing. Yeah. Hello, bye.
You need stuff.
Small problem, right?
When they built the original
Not anymore. My parents are divorced. My dad lives in California, and then my mom lives near Boston. Yeah, when I moved here, they left the Passaic. Yeah. I lived in the Passaic from like 1998 up till Okay, so what we're going to do is as follows. I know the acoustics are not great. What I'd actually like to do is, if you noticed, behind as we were walking, the group of boys who were very well behaved in the museum. I'm very impressed with them, despite what happened outside. They've really been great. So I'd actually like to go into there to talk about the gallows before we go in. So we've walked a little bit past because I want to show you the solitary confinement rooms. Like I said, this is one of the rooms where I am going to give you a warning that for some people it's hard for them to come inside a room like this. So it's your choice if you want to come in or not. The one thing that I do want to point out about the doors, in case you didn't notice, is that all the doors, and we saw this on the video, also have these smaller doors. And that's so that if there are prisoners inside a room and they need a prisoner to go in or to go out, they won't storm the door, right? Because if I had to open this whole door, a whole bunch of prisoners could rush out at once. Oh, wow. But if I only open this door, I have much more control as a soldier of the people that are going on inside. And so that's why you see the different doors. We're going to go now inside the solitary confinement. A couple of them are left open. Feel free, go inside if you want to close it for a minute, if you want to have that feeling. For some people it's a very important, and some people that's exactly their response. No thank you, so please choose whatever works best for you. And let's just make sure that this woman can get past us. Inside. This one's open as well.
Oh,
Make sure to join
We're waiting on another cruise from Florida.
The windows here, right? You can't, but nobody from outside is able to talk inside to them. But most of the windows in the prison rooms are open to the courtyard. This one is closed. Once you've taken a look and you feel like you've seen enough, just wait right back outside in the hallway, and we'll go to
solitary confinement.
No, it's not. One of the things is that the windows are also, they let a lot of light in from the courtyard. Where they just, yes, it's so crazy. Right, so you may not want to come in.
What's the step? What's the step?
Excuse me, sorry. Okay, so if I can have everyone's attention, the acoustics are not amazing in here either, but we don't have to deal with outside noise. So in that sense, this is the memorial room for people that were killed or sentenced to death by the British, Jews that were sentenced to death by the British and were killed, with the exception of Meir and Moshe, in Akko. We also have people, we have 3 people from the Nili, which were a group that was pre all of this stuff in the time of the Ottomans. And if you've ever been to Zichron Yaakov, you learn a lot about the Nili in that area. But also a fascinating kind of group of people in terms of their resistance for the Jewish state and the Jewish people. I told you that I wanted to kind of put something out there that is controversial. And here's where I want to do it. And maybe on the one hand, when you look around at these such young faces, maybe it's not the place to do it, but I definitely think it is. And that's just to give us food for thought. It's not about expressing an opinion, but it's a hard place to come to and to hear about soldiers that are committing suicide in order to take out British soldiers, right? Is that a Jewish thing that we do? Right? Is that something that we approve of? Is that something that we think is heroism? I don't know if anybody noticed the name of the street that this museum's on. Mish'ol HaGvura, the pathway of heroism. And so the state is making a very clear statement about how they view the people here. But I think that we need to ask ourselves, what is the Torah's approach to this? And I don't have a good answer. It's not that I'm coming here with a shita that I want to give you, but I want to put the question out there. And I will tell you that I grew up in a more right-wing Orthodox kind of educational system. A lot of my teachers, just to give you context, were like Lakewood teachers, is what we called them, right? I didn't go to a Beis Yaakov, but definitely more from that kivun. And we were always taught that Holocaust Memorial Day, right, Yom HaShoah, is not something we celebrate because it's in Nisan, and we don't have a day of mourning in Nisan, which is the month of Geulah, but more than that, because it's on the day of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And so that's not something that we necessarily support as Jews because the people in the Warsaw Ghetto were fighting a losing battle. And where's the value of life? Or if I take a look at the story of Masada, right? The story of Masada became this popular. It's really interesting. There are 3 top sites in Israel that people visit. The Kotel is the first one. Yad Vashem, which by the way is mandated on state visits. And the third one's Masada. Not the Dead Sea. Masada. People don't go to the Dead Sea all the time. People, why? It's so mind-boggling. But the idea of Masada, especially in the early 1900s, when the Jewish community was looking for strong, vibrant heroes for these young boys to look up to, the story of Masada became a story of heroism. And what do we do with that? Because today you should know, I told you about the furthering education for tour guides, so those of us that are educationally inclined, there's a big discussion in some of these Ishtamuyot about how we deal with the story of Masada. Because it's not the same as it was 10, 15, 20 years ago when youth groups used to climb up. We don't treat mass suicide in the same way. And so when we stand here and we pay tribute to these young, beautiful neshamot who gave their lives doing what they thought was right for the state, we still have this question. And for some of us, it's not a question, right? For some of us, they're heroes, and that's it, and we applaud them, and that's beautiful. But I think, one second, I think that what is really beautiful is being able to stand in a room and say, there are people here who feel strongly one way, there are people here who feel strongly another way, and people who don't know how they feel, and we can still stand in a room and pay tribute. And to end on our theme today of Olim, right? If you ever talk about Olim in Nachlaot, again, going back to tours that I do in Nachlaot, they had all sorts of different types of Jews who have never met each other before. What do you mean Jews don't speak Polish? Or what do you mean Jews don't speak, like, you're dark, you can't be Jewish, or you're white, you can't be Jewish, right? All of these different kinds of, when people came to Israel, when we had kibbutz galuyot, they had to learn to deal with differences. When people came to Israel, some of those differences were what you put in your chamim versus you call it cholent or cholent, right? Some of those differences were the matter of, again, what language you spoke or what you believed in terms of culture and mixing Sephardi and Ashkenazi and all of those different Ethiopian, Temanim. The Shuk is amazing for that, right? But many times it was ideological. Are you Zionist? Are you not? Are you Hasidish? Are you not? What does your God look like? And the bracha of being Olim that I feel as an Olah is to stand in a room like this and know that just as much as I care about Eretz Yisrael, all of these boys care about Eretz Yisrael. And I stand here and I daven that nobody else should have to give the sacrifice that they did. And I stand here and I daven that no matter where we stand on the spectrum of this very challenging issue, that we're able to look each other and say, I don't see your head, I see your heart. We're going to go take a look at the gallows. Again, for some people, yes?
I see Eli Cohen
The Syrian spy, he's also in this one.
Yes, I'm not sure why.
Oh, okay.
Except that he would, I don't know.
I would say that because all of these gave their lives for the state of Israel.
It's true, but then you could expand that very much. I'm not sure.
He was also executed.
He was, and he was hanged, so maybe, I'm not sure, maybe these are people that were hanged by outside governments in, maybe. The Neely were hanged. But so look, no, I was saying these three are the Neely were hanged. Sure. Yes. So I will not give stock, obviously, but I will point you into the direction of people that discuss Shekel. And Shekel following on his sword, knowing that he was injured, and was that something that was right or something that was wrong? That's where a lot of that conversation happened. So I will direct you in that direction in terms of asking that question. Hold on, I will take your questions, but I do want to be careful of timing for the people that need to go. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to take us to the gallows. We will see, and very clearly, I'll point out where the room is. You'll see a model of the orange where the grenade was. You'll see the gallows where again no Jews were ever hanged on these gallows. And then we're going to leave, and we're going to walk out of a place that held so much Jewish determination and so much Jewish pain. And we're going to continue on our lives in Yerushalayim and the rest of Israel, knowing that it's because of that determination and that pain, and because of our own determination, that the Israel Hashem, like I said, we will only have smachot to share with Am Israel. So come, let's go take a look.
So my 2000 is B'nai B'rach. Do you want to leave?
Where's she taking everybody now?
The gallows.
So this is the rooms that they would have been held the night before. You can see how they would have snuck in the orange here, and then those are the gallows. This is my home. So when I call it thank you. Yes. Okay, so you can see here, these are where the solitary confinement was for the night before they were sentenced, though they were supposed to be hanged. Here's the model of the orange that the grenade was inside, and then those are the gallows. This is also a letter that they put, you can see Mayor Feinstein, I don't want to read your picture, but Mayor Feinstein and Moshe Barzani wrote a letter and handed it to the guards before they sang Hatikva and hugged each other and detonated the grenade. Once you, just to give people kind of a chance to circle in, once you've gone up to the gallows, if you can come out, we'll come outside together as a group. I think that there's somebody from the Olim organization that wanted to say hello. Correct, exactly. And originally they had wanted to accept.
Right, because they blew themselves up.
I missed it. How did the grenade get to them?
Here's a model of the orange.
Yeah. How did it get?
They were given food. They were given an orange and they snuck it inside a basket of oranges.
I see.
Yeah.
So should we just wait outside?
Just, yeah, we'll walk outside together. I'm finishing in a minute. I can't actually hear you because I'm not putting the phone in my ear.
It was in a basket.
I mean, he's still accused for
I mean, obviously they are very they gave each other a hug and
And remind me, and the reason they didn't do it with the Jewish soldiers is
because the rabbi was going to come, but not Rabbi Levine, the other rabbi. Exactly, they didn't want to hurt him. He didn't sneak it in. Somebody else sneaked it in. They asked him to. He said, in the middle by the bathroom. Instead of turning right to the bathroom, is somebody coming? Oh, it's the bathroom. You don't know the number? Okay. Yes, exactly. Yes. So the tombstones were part of the work that the soldiers, that the prisoners did. They made tombstones.
Just like
They're here, yeah, exactly.
But they weren't buried here.
No, no.
Wow, thanks so much. Can I ask you, what about Jewish servicemen in the British Army?
Were they here?
No, so there were Jews that were in the British Army as well.
Right, so I don't...
Very complicated.
Yeah.
Very complicated.
So I don't know if any of them are stationed here. I don't know what their story would have been.
I know someone who was taking a transport, and one was in the British Army, and some was a soldier, and the other one was a detainee.
Wow.
From the same,
Wow. That's crazy. Okay, everybody, at this point, I'd like to say thank you very much. This has really been wonderful to get back out and to start touring again and to see so many people inside the museum that was not open for so long. I just wanted to give you directions in case anybody needs to know how to get anywhere. To the left over here, we have Rehov HaNevi'im. It's a good place to get cabs or anything like that. And if you go to the right, this is the Kikar Safar building where we started. So that'll kind of get you into the direction that you need. So thank you very much. It's really been a pleasure, and I hope to see you on future tours. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to Ruby for giving us an absolutely amazing tour.
Yeah.
We've really learned so much and it's been so special. So thank you so
Really
very
my
much.
pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great day.
Amazing.
Enthusiasm, passion.
Thank you.
Above and beyond all the information.
I really appreciate that. I'm glad that you enjoyed.
Definitely.
You are exceptional and inspirational.
Oh, thank you.
Oh my gosh.
You should do this more often.
You really should.
And I
You really
appreciate
should.
it.
You've got groupies here.
Thank you.
Adorable.
V'simcha.
Make sure you have your comfy shoes on. Quite a bit of walking.
Pleasure. I'm glad you enjoyed.
I love your enthusiasm.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Definitely.
Terrific. Thank you.
No problem. My pleasure.
And I love your mind.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you. This was one of the best tour guides I've had.
Oh wow. Well, thank you so much.
I say